This is indeed historic, as I started my conversation with you today. And I'm not afraid to say it is. But instead of joining us on the right side of history, all Republicans can come up with is this: slow down, stop everything, let's start over. Do you think you've heard these same excuses before? You're right. When this country belatedly recognized the wrongs of slavery, there were those who dug in their heels and said, slow down. It's too early. Let's wait. Things aren't bad enough.
Well, welcome back to Harbaugh. Those remarks by Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid set off a stream of Republican criticism. Let's listen to the medley of complaint. Here it comes.
I think it's beneath the dignity of the Majority Leader, one. I think it's beneath the dignity of the Senate, and I personally am insulted by the Majority Leader.
Just as another indication of the desperation that the Democrats are showing and the pressure which they're feeling. I mean, folks tend to crack under pressure.
I would very much appreciate if Senator Reid would come to the floor and, if not apologize, certainly clarify his remarks.
Well, to break this down, it's time for the Politics Fix. Richard Wolff's an MSNBC political analyst. He's a senior strategist at Public Strategy. Are you still with Public Strategies, Richard?
I am.
Okay, good. And Pat Buchanan is always with us as MSNBC political. Pat, let's get this straight. Where are you on the slavery issue to start with? You're pretty much against that now, right? You've stopped your foot dragging on that one, right?
On that one, Chris, I'm with the radical Republicans who passed the 13th, right. 14th, and 15th Amendment. It was your party, Chris,
as you recall,
which was a little more in opposition.
Okay, I was going to bring that out, but you've done it so well. I thought you were still back there with Stonewall fighting for the... where's some of your family fighting for the Grays, the Gray line there?
Yeah, under Nathan Bedford Forrest and other fine folks like that, Chris.
Okay, well, now that we've settled the history here, Pat, what was smart or not smart about Harry Reid comparing what he calls the foot dragging by the Republicans on health care, which is really down the line of opposition, to those who opposed doing something about slavery?
Well, what he should have done is compare it to Republicans who were, by and large, opposed to Medicare, Medicaid, and a lot of those programs of the Great Society. But what's foolish about it, Chris, is when you make a statement like that, and the statement itself is subject to attack, and everybody forgets the point you're making, and people are piling on you for a stupid, ahistorical statement. So the fellow that wrote that, I think, and apparently Harry Reid got up and read this, it's reflective on him as well as the fellow that wrote it. And there's no upside to something like this, and he sort of semi-backed away.
Is there another side to this argument, Richard Wolff, or is Pat dead right?
Oh, Pat's dead right. I don't think this was smart. I think it was ham-fisted and clunky. Look, Democrats have been trying to find a moral way to talk about health care, because if you just talk about costs, it doesn't get you far enough when you're asking senators to take the tough vote here. And it really is about cost. This isn't universal health care. It's not the long-term Democratic dream. But to talk about it in moral terms is one thing. To say it's like slavery, I think slavery should be put alongside Nazism. Unless you're talking about literal slavery, there are no comparisons. Civil rights may be a comparison if you want to talk about how do you change the course of American history on a moral issue, but slavery, too much, and it's clunky. At best, it's clunky.
At the 1988 Democratic Convention, by the way, the Democrats always nominate the guy who doesn't give the best speech normally. Jesse Jackson gave one hell of a speech in 88. He talked about the maid, not the poor person, the maid who's working or the nurse who's working in a hospital, working a good 40 or 50 hours a week, doing a real job but not having health care. He said she makes the bed, she takes care of the bed, she cleans the bedpan, but when it comes time to be sick herself, can't afford to get one of those beds for her own care. I think that's a better comparison if you're going for the moral issue. Your thoughts, Pat? Because there is a moral argument to be made that no one should be kept from the hospital door.
Well,
I believe.
Chris, I mean, your point is exceedingly well taken in this sense. You humanize it, you personalize it, you make it out to be an individual. You don't use abstractions, public option, and all that nonsense. What you say is that, quite frankly, here's the person, and here's where they are, and here's what they can't get. And do we really want that? You appeal to the heart of America, to its better instincts, quite frankly, when you do that. But at first, the abstract things are not that good. And when you start dragging Hitler into it or slavery into it, you've lost the argument.
So we've agreed now, never compare anything to the Holocaust, never compare anything to slavery, except, as you put it so well, Richard, slavery. You're allowed to compare slavery to slavery. Okay, we'll be right back with something a little more simple. We're going to look at that chart that shows that first year of a presidency, December, which we're in right now, is not so good a leading indicator of where that president is going to end up when it comes time for re-election. It's fascinating to see the randomness of these numbers, which we love so much. As someone pointed out earlier, I think Chuck Todd, we do love our numbers, but they don't always matter. Welcome back. We're back with Richard Wolff and Pat Buchanan. Pat, I know you love this stuff. Richard, I know you're getting to love this stuff. These are the numbers for the presidents and how they do at the end of the first year. This time, December, the December of their first year. Let's look at this. Bush 43, that's George W., the most recent Bush, 86% he had in his first year, December, and he got reelected. Of course, President Bill Clinton was reelected, but he was only 53% at this point. George Bush Sr. was 71% at this point. He lost his reelection. Ronald Reagan was down at 49%. He won his reelection. Jimmy Carter was up at 57%. He lost his reelection. Richard Nixon was 59%, pretty hefty, and he won. Do you see any correlation there, Pat Buchanan?
No, I really don't. I think Obama, there's no doubt that he can't be too happy with 47%, Chris.
It's up to 50 today, Pat. Bad news for you. Okay. We're up to 50 today.
All right, 50%, that's not bad. And frankly, I wouldn't be terribly worried about it. But what it does say is an important thing, Chris. He has failed to create the coalition that he had wanted to create. He's failed to create a real bipartisan base. The Republicans are almost completely gone. The independents and moderates, he's lost a majority of them. He's got a solid support among Democrats, but he is not the president he wanted to be. He has not achieved what he wanted to achieve, which was what Reagan and FDR and even LBJ eventually had. I mean, LBJ had it in 65.
Yeah, you're right. Now, we have to do a whole segment on that someday. What went wrong in terms of whether that was a Bill Kristol plot going early on. There was some real strategy against uniting and letting him have a piece of the action. I think McCain had something to do with it. They did not want to be bipartisan. Any thoughts to that, Richard? Let's go back to the question of history, Richard. Does his poll standing now tell you his chances for re-election?
Not at all. But look at the model. Pat used the word eventually. Reagan eventually put this together. Reagan is the model they've had in mind. They won't say this explicitly, but remember when Obama raised it in the campaign? It annoyed the hell out of the Clintons. But look at who has the parallel here. In many ways, Reagan had it kind of easier because the recession was nowhere near as deep and as long as this one. The only benefit for Obama is that this recession started earlier. It started before he came into office. With Reagan, it was time kind of at the start of his term. But the Reagan model, being a transformative leader, coming back from the recession and going into a strong re-elect, that's really what they have in mind here. And eventually, first year, what did Reagan's numbers tell you? It tells you nothing about predictive.
He got his tax cuts, big tax cuts through, and got them through fairly swiftly. Chris, Reagan had the boll weevils. He had a real Democratic constituency that liked him, and many of whom had voted and actually loved him. And he put some part of the Democratic Party together with his own fairly almost completely solid Republican base.
What were they called?
Reagan Democrats.
Right. We don't have a name for that right now. Thank you, Richard Wolff. Thank you, Pat Buchanan.